The perfect phone doesn't exist, or does it? There are so many good phones with so many cool features, but they all have downsides. What if I took every good feature from the best phones ever made and combined it into one flawless device? No compromises, no stupid downgrades. Samsung. Just perfection. What does that look like? I thought this would be a fun thing to do, so why not? Let's start with the screen. So, it would have thin bezels like the S25 Ultra, which would look something like this. However, it would have an under-display selfie camera with Face ID. So essentially, it would look something like a redmagic 10 Pro, but instead of having this low-quality selfie camera, it would have Face ID like the iPhone. And then I personally think that 6.8-inch phones are a little bit too big, so ideally, I would have a 6.4-inch flat, 1440p, 120Hz AMOLED, and then anti-glare, which is on the S24 Ultra, and then Aqua Touch, which is on OnePlus 13 or OnePlus 12, and then obviously an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner. And then the design, which I think is very subjective, but I would love a matte back. Something that doesn't really show any fingerprints, or a stainless steel back, something like on the OnePlus Nord 4, because I love when you leave the phone out for a while and it becomes really cold. The stainless steel just feels so premium. And then the titanium frame of the iPhone, which I've actually used before and I really like how it feels. However, what I don't like is the very sharp square corners, so I'd want them slightly rounded like the S23 Ultra, or maybe something like an iPhone 11, or maybe a self-healing back, because I found this cool phone made by LG which had a back that could actually recover from scratches, which is really cool. Yeah, just look how they fade over time. It's almost like your phone is invincible. And the reason why I want all of this is because I don't want to use a case on my phone. And the thing is, like, right now I am using a case, but it's just rubber or silicone, or I don't know what this is, but this phone is so uncomfortable without a case. I just wish there was something super comfortable with the premium materials that I could actually appreciate. And then it would have to be thinner and lighter than this phone, so it would have to be under 9mm and under 220 grams, so ideally something like the OnePlus 13. And then imagine all of this in a foldable, like a OnePlus Open or a Huawei Mate XT, like the trifold foldable, but with no downsides. And I haven't even gotten to the camera specs. It would probably be completely impossible, but hear me out. My number one thing would probably be a 1-inch main sensor from the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. Now the camera bump is absolutely massive, but I think it's worth it because that 1-inch sensor is also massive. So as you can see, there's more background blur than the S24 Ultra because the sensor is so big, and the low light performance would also be amazing. And then I would take the absolutely ginormous 3.7x from vivo X200 Pro, as well as a telemacro. And if you look at the specs, vivo has a 1/1.4-inch telephoto sensor, which comes out to 0.7 inches, whereas the Samsung one is 1/3.52, which is only 0.2 inches. That's literally like 1/3 of the size. And if you look at some comparisons, vivo just has the best zoom camera on any phone. There's even a whole video shot on vivo, and look how incredible it looks. Like, you cannot even tell this was shot on a phone. The background blur and the quality of the sensor is just amazing. And then on top of that, imagine having the 10x optical zoom from the S23 Ultra, which has been removed recently. But if I could have that on a phone completely beefed up with a much larger sensor, we would have insane zoom shots. And then I would have 8K RAW and 8K log. Now I say this because there's obviously phones like the Samsung or the OnePlus or the Xiaomi that record in 8K, but the 8K just doesn't look good. It just looks over sharpened and over processed. And the S25 Ultra also has log mode, which lets you record in flat like this, and then in color grade you add the color back, but it just doesn't look that good. And then I found this video where the guy applied a chroma checker tool designed to isolate and visualize data, whatever that means. But if you look at the video, he's basically showing that in the log mode, there's a bunch of artifacts, which means it's just not the best log mode. So if we could have RAW, that would be amazing. Oh, and then gimbal stabilization, which you could find on the vivo X100 Ultra, and the main camera sensor has gimbal OIS, which makes the video really stable. And then you take all of those sensors and you process them using the iPhone processing pipeline, because from experience, the iPhone video just looks so much better, and if they had those sensors, the quality would be amazing. And then for the ultra wide, there's this phone, right? And it had a massive ultra wide sensor. This is basically the size of a main sensor with autofocus and optical image stabilization. But then next year they downgraded it and it's basically like half the size and it doesn't have the stabilization. So imagine the action mode from the iPhone with that huge ultra wide with the gimbal stabilization. It would be GoPro level. And then in terms of operating system, definitely not iOS. I hate iOS. So it would have to be Android, preferably Pixel UI or Pixel OS, because they get fast updates. And I made a video about this recently that Samsung takes ages and they delay the updates, but the Pixels don't. So I would probably be on Android 16 by now. And then imagine this, if the phone could boot to Android, but then dual boot to something like SteamOS, so you could actually use something like a Snapdragon 8 Elite for Windows games. And then DeX support would be kind of nice, so you could plug it in into like a monitor, turn it into a desktop. I don't really use it, but it'd be nice to have. And then for the features, this is a nice one. First of all, I'd have a MagSafe charger from the iPhone because I could have cool accessories, something like a MagSafe wallet or like a tripod, so you just stick it in and you don't have to worry about anything else. And then the haptics from the Pixel, which are probably one of the best. 7,000 milliamp hour battery from the redmagic 10 Pro. I've already mentioned this phone, but look at this. No selfie camera, Snapdragon 8 Elite, a 7,000 milliamp hour battery, and the phone isn't even that thick or anything. And then a replaceable battery, which I know makes no sense because of all the design choices I've made. Imagine something like this, like an S5. You just pop the back off, replace the battery, and you have another 7,000 milliamps for another like 2 days. And then stereo speakers from an ROG phone, a headphone jack for all the content that I like watching, and then a micro SD card, but specifically the one from Sony phones, because as you can tell, you can just put your fingernail and take it out, so you don't need any like SIM tools or anything. How convenient is that? And then obviously the best specs, so the Snapdragon 8 Elite, 24 gigs of RAM, because I don't know, why not? And 500 gigs of storage, which I'd probably expand to put all my homework on it. And then battery bypass from ROG. So if you look at this, bypass charging in game, supply the power to the system and stop charging the battery, which means instead of charging it and discharging it while gaming, it uses all the power from the charger and not from the battery, which would be useful for watching my content. And then the S Pen with Bluetooth, Samsung, and then AirDrop for Android, which would be completely native without needing any extra apps, and it would work just as well. And yeah, I think that would be my perfect phone, and let's call it the Snowball phone or the Snow phone, Benji phone. Yeah, this guy designed the phone. But yeah, let me know what you think and make sure to post your perfect specs down in the comments. I want to see what you guys come up with.